G'day warbanders. Today I want to discuss a topic that's really dear to my heart, and that is the question of, do graphics matter in strategy games or do they not? And I've seen a lot of mobile game comparisons, as always I've seen in reviews of new strategy games, and I find those comparisons or those superficial understandings are really annoying and not helpful. Okay, I am obviously in the camp of graphics don't really matter. And I'll explain. I have some arguments here to present, and if you don't agree with me, that's fine. We can have a chat in the comments, but I'm going to be presenting to you an argument here. It's not a evidence-based argument. It is simply an opinion, what I think. So do keep that in mind. Now I'll start with my first point. Give you an overview. The graphics, the good graphics, they're not suited for complex strategy games. Okay. You can't really fit them in-depth simulations or at this present time of our technology. Of course, technology is always advancing, but at this present time I cannot see 3D ultra realistic graphics in a game, say like War in the East 2 or Paradox games. We can't have a 3D representation of everything in a strategic game or a tactical game. Those certainly exist in RTS games, but with RTS, you have also concessions you have to make. You can't have everything represented. Another point is the graphics are a drain on developer resources. I would rather in-depth gameplay over meaningless graphics. Of course, your preferences on the graphics versus the gameplay may vary. As I said before, it's okay if you disagree, but I just feel like people shouldn't dismiss games or strategy games on the basis of graphics alone. I see that happen a lot of times in reviews or just simple comments. I see on YouTube videos for new strategy games, it looks like a mobile game. That doesn't, I don't want a movie, is my point about that. It's very superficial understanding. All right, so I'm going to move on to the main meat of my argument, which is, as I said before, high-end graphics can't usually translate into high-end simulations. And the reason for that is that we can't have everything simulated 3D. We can't have millions of troops. For example, War in the East 2, Shadow Empire, these all deal with the logistics, the operational aspects of warfare. These involve millions of thousands of men, hundreds of tanks, thousands of airplanes. You can't have that all in a 3D space, can you? And you just can't have that 3D space. Of course, games like Total War, they have advanced into that space where they have thousands of troops, but not to the level of hundreds of thousands of troops, like the usual field armies, your corps. You don't have that in those 3D representations. Mount & Blade Warband is a great example of gameplay over graphics. The combat, the battles, the medieval grand strategy in the background, it all contributes to an immersive, endlessly replayable experience. Okay, no one's really going to play Mount & Blade Warband for the graphics only. Like, the graphics are dated. Even when it came out, I believe, the graphics were, not up to par with other games that were coming out. And that's okay. Graphics don't need to be prioritized. Actually, focusing on graphics often makes games in general forgettable. How we see games that graphically look the same. They're great graphics, but they all look kind of the same because they're in the same engine. I remember games that are highly interactive, highly complex. I remember those games. I don't remember, graphically appealing games. I don't remember. That's just my preference, right? You might remember. I don't. It's not memorable to me. And there's certain trade-offs. You can't fit everything into a game. You got to make concessions. Paradox games are a great example where they're in the middle of this, line, or the graphics line and the gameplay line. They're in the middle. They offer reasonably complex games like Victoria 3, Victoria 2, but they don't have everything represented in 3D. The graphics aren't ultra realistic. The characters look kind of cartoony in a sense. People have made that distinction, I've seen. First impressions are important. I've noticed this. When you look at a game, you look at a trailer, the first thing you get is the graphics or the gameplay trailer. And that's human nature. We're visually stimulated, creatures. We look at things, but simply dismissing a game based on its looks is a bad mindset. It leads to a logic of I want good graphics only, and I just ask the question, why don't you just go watch a movie? Or why don't I just go watch a movie? Because movies they look better than strategy games, don't you think? And the point is, strategy games are highly interactive. Okay, with amazing graphics, you trade that interactivity away. Usually, not absolutely, but usually. Strategy games about commanding forces and looking at the bigger picture, usually from a bird's eye view or a god view of some sort. In Paradox games, where you're like the spirit of the nation, or you're just some benevolent god, I suppose. It's not expected for strategy games to go into extensive 3D details, as I said before. Do I have to simulate all these tanks in 3D? Do I have to simulate 100 tanks? Do I have to have a battle component? Some games do that. They have a tactical layer, like the Ultimate General games. You have the strategic overview and the battle overview, but you can't have hundreds of thousands of men. There's a limit. There's a performance limit there, and developers have to make the game where it runs on normal machines. The average person like me or some other people, we don't have those high-end systems. We don't have that. There might be some games out there that do have those high-end systems, like they do have that high-end user base in mind, but not for us. Usually it's it's not for them. It's usually aimed at us, the average consumer. And I'll just move on to my other argument, is that not good good graphics doesn't have to be like ultra realistic. It can be style. Okay, that's the big point. Style over graphics, ultra realistic looking graphics. Some strategy games have certain stylized graphics, like Armored Commander 2 has graphics from the 90s, that sort of archaic, it's aiming for nostalgic purposes, while also having a great gameplay as a tank commander. It's more focused on the nitty gritties and not really a 3D space like War Thunder, for example. Because in Armored Commander 2 you have way more tanks, lots of detail right there. Another example, Patrician 3, it's 2D. The graphics are 2D, but it leads to that more Renaissance looking picture. Those Renaissance paintings? It kind of looks like that. And I feel like that's what they were aiming for there in Patrician 3, because you're more focused on the art of trade, which usually involves numbers, looking at trade routes. If I was just to focus on graphics, it's 2D, I'm not going to play that, I'm limiting myself to a very few select games, probably Paradox games, and that's not good. Not good for someone who's interested in strategy games to look at graphics only in that aspect. And in another game that I really love is Ultimate General American Civil War, and that game has 2D graphics. The terrain, 2D. The units, 2D. But it leads to that illusion, that graphical illusion that everything's looks grand scale, and you can't really capture that with ultra realistic graphics. Because if I put like 100,000 models of good looking good dudes, like models, the game would be like 1 FPS. That's the reality we're dealing with right now with our technology. But I'm not saying that it's impossible. Like, we could probably get to that level where we can have hundreds of thousands of men on the field in ultra realistic graphics. Maybe one day we will, but probably not in my lifetime. But right now, it's not. I don't think it should be a focus. So, conclusion. I'm not saying graphics don't matter at all. They do. You have to see your army, your country, your units. They have to be represented in some way. That can be a 2D, menu, or spreadsheet, or some sprite. As I've shown some the footage I've shown here. It can be in any way, but it doesn't have to be ultra realistic graphics. Okay, and this is where I think user interface plays a huge role. Does user interface fall under graphics? Maybe, but I feel the user interface is one of the core graphical things that strategy games have to get right. This is where I'm going to concede and say that if a strategy game doesn't have a decent UI, okay, that's not readable, it's not usable, there's no point. Even if it has a good simulation or good things under the hood, and it's not usable in the UI, like by most people except the developer, that's a bad thing. So that's where I can see my argument that graphics do matter in the sense of the user interface for strategy games. And I'll just conclude with this. As I said before, everyone has their preference. Some may prefer better graphics, but I don't find graphically beautiful games that interesting. To be perfectly honest, I'm looking for that strategic, interactive experience, and I'm not going to be, going to be, oh, look at these cool graphics, it's going to be a great game. Like, that is so superficial. But yeah, guys, that's my rant or argument about do graphics matter in strategy games. They obviously can and cannot matter. It's a complex subject matter. Oh, and also, if you like this sort of content, please subscribe. I'm almost hitting 1K subscribers. We do lots of content on this channel, strategy games most importantly, but I do also do these discussions. I also do reviews. I also do gameplay and all sorts of things. So yeah, guys, see ya, bye.